platform for professional certifications in tech areas, and Open Talk is our forum for exchange of ideas and for exploration of new dimensions. So amongst us today, we have an illustrious gentleman, Mr. Basudev Gangopadhyay, who is the MD of IT Origin. Mr. Gangopadhyay has considered an authority in the area of cybersecurity. He has devoted a large part of his life in that domain. And having joined Cognizant Technologies, popularly known as CTS, as you know, CTS, Mr. Gangopadhyay rose to be one of their directors. So we are honored to have you amongst us today, Mr. Gangopadhyay. Welcome to this webinar. We are also happy to have Mr. Amit Roy, not only a director at IT Origin, but also the life and spirit of IT Origin, a wonderful man who keeps everybody motivated and goes on sort of, spreading education and awareness of cybersecurity and related areas. So very happy to have you with us, Mr. Roy. IT Origin is a specialized organization focusing on cybersecurity and provide consultancy and training in that area. It is a member of DSCI and a partner of EC Council, the global body in cybersecurity, for their training needs. So thanks for being here, all colleagues from IT Origin. And it is your kind of mentoring, your guidance, which has, propelled us to go in that direction. So thank you so much. We really express our gratitude to you. We welcome our very knowledgeable panelists, Priya Dronadula, a wonderful person with a deep knowledge in the area that she represents. Mithilesh Singh, I think, who is having a bit of a challenge with his power supply and all that, will join in soon. Dr. Abhijit Dasgupta, a professor now at SP Jain Global Management School, but CTO many times over with many of the largest organizations in the country, a very dear friend. And our moderator, Mr. Dev Kumar Roy. Dev Kumar will introduce himself, but he's a charming personality with deep knowledge of cybersecurity. He's one of the young people in that field and really a fantastic person to talk to. So each one of you, my friends, panelists, you bring so much of authority and knowledge in that area, and we will all seek to learn from you today. So thank you for being here. The flow of the event, Dev Kumar will be the moderator and will guide the discussion. He will quiz the panelists and try to get the best of their knowledge and understanding for us. The last 15 minutes of the session, that is from 11:15 to 11:30, will be devoted to your Q&As. So please use the chat box to submit your Q&As, your questions, and my colleague Ram will collate them and give them to Dev Kumar, right? With this, I hand over the space to Dev Kumar to introduce the panelists and to start the entire session. Thank you all for being here. I'm sure you will enjoy the session. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Arun, for nice introduction. And I welcome everyone, our esteemed panelists and the audience to this session. So let me take it forward with wishing all of you as Happy New Year. We all know, how 2020 went. So it's really a challenging year for everyone. But any challenge will have certain opportunities and learnings. To me personally, it's kind of a life-changing event. And it seems to me like, our life, the way we look at it, and our economy as a whole, right, got a reset this year, last year. But at the same time, we expect a very bright 2021, want to see more opportunities and challenges. As you know, we have just, trying to come out of the pandemic related to COVID-19. And what it did to start this webinar, when the world's largest vaccination program is getting initiated today, right, in India, right? which is 16th Jan. So we hope that we will be over of this pandemic soon, and we'll back to the normal life. But the question is whether life will be back to the same normal or there will be a new normal, right? Because as all of you must recognize the fact that the way we used to use technologies, internet, has changed, right? We are more and more dependent on these platforms. Internet is kind of a lifesaver for last year, and I'm sure the habits of utilizing digital world and the internet is not going to get reversed. With that note, let me welcome our panelists today, Priya Dronadula. She has more than 22 years of experience in IT security, and primarily worked in the banking and financial sectors. She has enhanced an immense knowledge in the mission AI solutions, mission critical payment systems, and delivered many digital projects. I also welcome Dr. Abhijit Dasgupta. He is Director of Data Science Program in SP Jain School of Global Management. Prior to this, he actually created multiple startups, worked in multiple multinational companies, performed his CXO roles, and he is focusing on the data sciences, which is a very critical technological segment that are talk of the town today. I do have Mithilesh. I'm sure he will also join, but let me take the time to introduce him. He is, expert in information security and risk management portfolio. He is certified with multiple certifications like CISA, CISM, CDISC, CBCP, many more, and mostly focused on banking, financial segments, payment segments, telecommunication, and technology. So with this introduction, at the end, let me introduce myself. My name is Dev Kumar. I have more than 20 years of IT and security experience, worked in multiple multinational companies, and their security operations and security support. So with the note that the world has changed and how this post-pandemic world will look like, though pandemic is not yet over and we're trying hard to come out of it. So with that, I would start with Priya. If you can share what are the learnings we should learn from this pandemic when we consider cybersecurity as a whole. To help you, I give some statistics like these are Interpol statistics, which says that considering Q4 2019 and Q1 2020, the cybersecurity attacks increased a lot, which is around 160%. Just looking at India, it is almost 37% cyber attacks increased. So with that context, I would like to ask you, Priya, that if you can share, what is your thought, like, what we learned from this pandemic?
Thank you, Deb. It's a very interesting question and quite good statistics also supported by it. Of course, when this pandemic started, there are a lot of companies which actually we saw that it could sail through easily, and there were a few companies also which really struggled through the pandemic situation, especially in the area of cybersecurity. Because what is very important in these days, be it pre-pandemic or post-pandemic, the strategy for cybersecurity needs a complete, relook. Gone are those days where we were completely focused on, beefing up security of our servers, our internal network infrastructure, because everyone used to come to office, work from office, anybody coming from outside, inside the office, there are checks and network security controls to prevent any intrusion into the network. Now, this situation actually completely changed with the pandemic, with everybody working from home. So all systems had to be relooked at in terms of its security feature and ability to uh, kind of not being able to be compromised in any manner, because the network that people connect from and the systems that people connect from could be any public infrastructure or a home infrastructure. So it is going to be a different relook at the entire strategy. So that's a big learning from this pandemic which happened. So things like enhancing the digital trust in the applications, or even strong authentication mechanism, because how do we know whether it's the right user for the right reason with the right intent is having the right access, is something that is becoming more and more looked at with a lot of thought, and security features had to be implemented which support this kind of a model. So while one is the change in the way people access the systems, the second is the awareness itself on security. Uh, Everybody today uses a mobile phone. There is O365 in many of the mobile phones. Plus, you have your personal email IDs, and we do download a hell of a lot of apps in the mobile phones, which without even actually reading through the terms and conditions that is mentioned in the app, nor having ability to put some kind of a simple even antivirus software onto the mobile phones today. So the awareness level has to be really beefed up, and that was the first thing I think was a learning when the pandemic started, in terms of building the awareness level. And due to the pandemic, we also see an increase in the number of phishing attacks, specifically around the COVID-19 messaging and news around it. So a lot of increased phishing attacks has been there. So it's a constant monitoring of the situation and kind of alerts which are happening, and educating the workforce around it. So I think these two are two major aspects that was a learning from the cybersecurity perspective during the ongoing pandemic, both for the individual and the organization environment.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Thanks, Priya. I will like to go to Abhijit and ask the same question, that how you look at this pandemic, and how our thoughts about cybersecurity has changed.
Yeah, hi. Good morning to all of you guys. Pandemic has, okay, I just give you a background so that you will know. I'm a teacher, and I'm also continue to be a corporate executive. So, and the last 10 months have been really tough on us in terms of we are all stuck at home, and I'm sure all of you guys would be stuck at home as well. Now, having said that, the connection to the external world outside of our house has primarily been in the domain of through digital means, for example, Zoom, Google Meet, and many other things like that. That is number one. Number two is that I think We have also been used to use more online services to get our grocery and milk, bread even, and then sometime back I was also ordering eggs. I'm talking about the peak of the pandemic during June, July, August. So that has, to a large extent, has shaped our lives, and I don't, you know what, it just takes about 3 weeks to create a new habit, you know, and so we are now in multiple weeks thereafter, 40 weeks now, maybe more than that, yeah. So, of course, there has been a change in the habit, and if I may, make that statement. Before pandemic and after pandemic, life is going to be more and more digital. That is one, and it's going to be very important. And when you talk about digital, I'll give you an experience that I'm sure many of you guys would be knowing this, is in a typical tech company, you will see a specific project area is being made. And if you want to enter into that project area, it's partitioned. So you need to have a access control on your card, whatever you are going in to check in into your office. And that access control is letting you in. Not only that, the computer which you are using, that is also for a very special purpose. So you will not be able to, for example, you cannot email from that computer. Okay. So there are data leakage prevention systems that are implemented inside of the operating system that you are working. Now, what happens if the whole thing comes to your house and you are using your own computer to access the same set of systems? It's a huge paradigm shift. What it means is, and the company is not able to control your computer as much because it's a personal laptop or personal computer, for example. Okay. So all you need is probably a VPN to access your company servers and company resources. And I'll give you a very interesting example. You will see the enormity of the situation. And that's all about it. Okay, but I will tell you the risk. During this Black Friday, which happened on 27th, 28th November in the United States, and we have also in India, we also have a version of that. Just a moment. Sir, I will just give you a call back, sir. I'm in a webinar. I'll call you back, sir. একটার সময় ফোন করছি আপনাকে, okay? Yeah, okay. So you will know the scale and all. Maybe it could be an interesting information.
Yeah.
Okay. Typically, if you look at during the typical Amazon, companies like Amazon, Walmart, eBay, the large internet retailers, okay, they would be having about close to between 60,000 to 80,000 servers delivering the web experience. You can understand the enormity of I'm talking about real servers, okay? Yeah. And there could be multiple containers those are writing on those bare metals, and you can simply add into multiplying 3 to get a number, and then add another layer which is serverless compute, which would increase the number by another 2. So essentially you're talking about the lower end of the spectrum. You're looking at 300,000 instances that is running Amazon infrastructure. Okay, now here is the interesting thing. Now you want to make an update onto your shopping cart. Maybe you want to make a change on your recommender system, which is powering Amazon's much of sales. You will have to deliver that into how many servers you can understand, and it has to be real time. Now, doing that inside of a data center is one thing, and running this DevOps engine outside, I'm sure you're all tech guys, so you'll be knowing what I'm talking about. Doing that over a VPN, which has a latency, is another thing altogether. Okay, so, and then anybody making a mistake will actually put the whole thing down. Yeah. Because there are people on those machines, on those instances, who are conducting their transactions, right? So there would be about 1 billion hits at any given point of time. So unless and until the person, the engineer is absolutely trained into protecting not only himself, because Amazon and all these companies are also prone to different kind of cyber threats. You are in for a disaster. The same happened, and some time back, a couple of Google services went down.
Yes.
It
Correct.
went down because some person did not put a proper security patch onto the code, and the system understood it as a malware, so it shut it down automatically. And that is why there was a 30 minutes blackout on many of the Google's systems. So pandemic has given rise to a certain feature, which is you cannot afford to be careless. That's a very, very important thing. Okay.
Got it. Got it.
You cannot be careless. Okay. The second thing is that you will have to move into an environment of zero trust or no trust.
Correct.
Because the moment you are trusting a certain system to perform a certain, you do not know, there may be phishing attack, there may be many other those kind of people who are trying to do that. And those are mostly targeted to idiots. And the world, according to Max Muller, is 95%, 97% idiot and 3% who knows. Okay. So the entire gamut of these cyber attacks happen to those, are targeted to those 97%. I come from a place called Asansol, and there is a place nearby. There is a city or a town called Jamtara. That is a Netflix serial also on Jamtara, and
Yeah.
they are the mastermind of banking frauds. You know how the mechanism is that they will collect, they will go to a bank. So wherever you're giving your number, you have given your number somewhere, you know, hoping that you're going to get some points or you're going to get some gifts. Okay. So, and I am sure, you know, I don't know, banks may not agree, but they do this kind of database marketing all over, and they share details. Okay. Now, the mechanism of operation was that the person will call up a number, okay, randomly. He will be having the name, the telephone number, and the bank account and the bank branch of that person. So let's say I call up Mithilesh, see, I know Mithilesh, you are very smart. And I call up Mithilesh, look, you have got a lottery. Okay, look, first instance is, now remember that's greed. Okay, so you create a greed. So Mithilesh says, hey, wow, I have got a lottery. Now what exactly I have to do? I say, you're from this bank, right? You have an account with this bank, and this is a number. Yeah, of course. And so, see, there will be an OTP that will be coming to your number to validate that you are the person. So can you just send, can you just share that OTP, your home? You will suddenly see your money is taken out from your system, because the banking transaction will require an OTP, which is going to come onto your mobile phone. And if you share that OTP and the other details, there is hardly you can do anything to stop anybody to take the money away from your computer. So greed is one of the very important part which is used by the hackers or by the people out here, in specifically for the phishing attacks, primarily for phishing attacks. Is used, it is a very, very common human sentiment. Plus, you have got a lottery. You know, share these details and I will share with you the other information. Okay. So zero trust is a very important thing in the whole gamut. Particularly if you are working, and I know the couple of companies whom I speak to. I'm also an educator, by the way. So many companies that we are talking to, they talk about digital transformation. Okay, currently as of right now. So digital transformation inside of a company and digital transformation based on a distributed model, they are entirely different gamut. Okay. Yeah. What pandemic has done is that it has taken the person away from the office. So certain rules that operates inside of an office doesn't work when you are at home. At home, your computer may be accessed by your child, by your wife, who may be trying to check something or email, or your son may be, if you have a young child, he might be willing to, you know, play a computer games. And then when you're playing those kind of games, a lot of patches get downloaded, which is essentially trying to track what the hell you are doing. So these are the changes I would say is mostly related to your level of awareness and level of ability to control your greed. So for example, you're playing a game and it says that, download this and it will happen, and you get maybe $2 extra credit. What that download, that particular patch that you are downloading, it could be a malware. So people who are familiar, I'm sure of you are familiar with darknet and all sorts of things. So, and there are other ways to deal with these situations. But essentially, in my experience, Dave, I have seen, and this is if I can share with you, the hackers or all of these, they exploit, A is greed,
Yeah.
and number two, your stupidity.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Thanks.
So,
Yeah, thanks, Vijit. So we'll move on from here. So I, take one specific word which is very interesting here is greed, right? So, we need to understand, like, how the greed is actually exploited. That's the vulnerability as a human being that we always have, right? So that is one thing. And another thing you pointed out very correctly is the awareness part, and how the life is changed. So I'm happy that Mithilesh could join in. So go to Mithilesh now. We were discussing with Priya and Abhijit, and they shared about their understanding, like how life has changed, and from a cybersecurity standpoint, how the pandemic has changed our way of looking at cybersecurity. So I come to you, Mithilesh, that when we talk about this pandemic, what do you think, like what are the cyber threats that are actually increasing, either from a individual perspective or from a organization perspective? What is your view?
So, hope I'm audible.
Yeah.
Good. So, first of all, apology for being late because of some technical challenges. So, I was listening to Dr. Dasgupta. So, I think I'll pretty much be in line with the thought what he has shared. And so, the biggest challenge what we all have faced during this when the pandemic kicked in. So, many of the things which went virtual. So the entire globe became work from home kind of on the concept, right? So if you see many of the organizations who were hesitant in moving to the cloud kind of setup or remote work kind of setup, suddenly it was a big milestone or big task which was ahead to those organizations. So the biggest challenge what organization had faced at the time to bring most of the population or the employee strength working and supporting their customer. So the customer experience should not get hampered. But at that moment of time, there was a lot of challenges, not only in order to set up the infra, but also the cyber related incident started shooting up like anything. So as Dr. Dasgupta mentioned about the phishing related attacks, wherein people who try to intend to be a genuine uh, person sending an email asking for some kind of information, some kind of favor, and then when you get trapped into that, then that information will be used to pursue further attacks, right? And Jamtara is one of the very great example what he just mentioned about, and I think there's some web series also on that. So in fact, it was not only on the for the organization to tackle that kind of situation, because we always understand that human is the weakest link. It's the factor which is always being misused by any of the hacking community or attackers. And also not only that part, the biggest one of the challenge what we all have faced recently, that privacy has getting impacted, and many of the dark web where the security researchers have been identifying that in the recent pandemic time, many of our data, be it the card data, credit card data, be it your personal banking related information, they are very easily being sold in the dark web community. So these are some of the spike in the kind of cyber incidents which have started. And I believe this work from home will continue for at least for a couple of more years till the time things will become BAU or things will become normal. Although it is a new normal, we all appreciate and understand that. But in order to continue this with a cultural shift of complete environment getting into work from home, we need to be very, very mindful. And many of the employee as well as the people who are at an individual level, and as also Mr. Dasgupta mentioned about that, the boundary between the office and the home is almost getting diminished, because your devices are being accessed by your family member, or many other websites, many other portal which you are accessing through office laptops or personal laptops. So that boundary has got diminished. So it's very easily the hacker can get into your systems through various kind of lucrative or through certain kind of greed offerings and all those. So user awareness, employee awareness is very, very important aspect in this kind of scenario, wherein you need to be very, very careful, very, very mindful that how the user awareness can be built not only at an organization level, but also through the various education systems what we have at a school level, institutional level, as well as the university and college level. And that is what is very, very important. So communities should also come up with those kind of initiatives, that professionals who are in this kind of domain in technology, cyber, and those kind of area, they should also help the community to learn that what are the possible impacts, what can be created because of this new work, new normal where we are in right now.
Excellent. Thank you, Mithilesh. Thanks for your insight. And I pick up few words like you said virtual. Most of the things are becoming virtual. And another important thing that you have talked about, lack of awareness mostly, right? So that's one of the main issue of getting compromised with all these cyber attacks. So I was reading a couple of statistics, and these are again the Interpol statistics, and many member countries provided data. And what we see that in 2019, when malware and ransomware were the most topmost threats that we saw, but during the pandemic, this phishing, scam, fraud, that has increased, like the overall 100%, 59% is like that, right? So it's basically targeting the individuals, as Abhijit mentioned, targeting the people who are not aware, or not that much knowing the cyber attacks incidents. They are not aware at all, right? And at the same time, another thing which is also coming up, which is fake news, right? So I see, for 14%, though you can call it cyber threat or not, but it's kind of, statistics showing that 14% is related to fake news, right? And, making people, believe something which is not real. And it's all happening because things are now becoming virtual, right? So we do not really go out and understand, talk to people, and whatever is happening is through social medias and through internet. Good. So now, Priya, I come to you. So what do you think, like as a country, like we understand it's a global phenomena, it's not something very specific to India, but what do you think, like as a country, India, how much we are prepared, like to address this kind of cyber threats, and the considering that things are changing from a pandemic standpoint, we are more isolated now, and working from home. So what do you think, like as India, as a country, how much we are prepared? Are we really prepared at all?
It's a very, very important question that you have asked, Deep. In India as a country, are we really prepared for this kind of a situation? And will we be able to manage increasing cyber attacks happening on different spaces? The answer to this is, though there is awareness on, digital awareness, because being in BFSI, I can say that the banks do conduct regular awareness sessions for people. They do phone calls and tell people not to share information to anyone. But despite all these efforts that is being put in by corporates, the awareness levels around information security, protecting the data, or your digital assets is not really up to the mark. And this is a serious concern for us as a country, because I think one of the important aspect is, such kind of education should start from the grassroots level, which itself is a gap today. While the toddlers, right from when you're toddlers these days, kids get exposed to multiple digital assets. The information around how to protect these assets and how to protect your data and identity is a big concern today in India. And we see this in our day to day, right? How many of us really would have gone ahead and checked our router passwords, changed the router? This is very basic. So, whatever the person comes and sets up as the admin password for the router, and most often these are standard passwords which are available. It's very easy for not even a sophisticated hacker, but a very simple, college going student to hack through to the system and get required information. So our awareness level is very, very minimalistic in this space. And it is just not that. Today, if you look at awareness, we do, our digital footprint is available everywhere, almost everywhere. Right from, your ordering online, to you visiting a mall where you give away your phone numbers and you give away your date of birth. There's a lucky draw. People just lure you into providing information about you more and more. So your digital footprint and information about you is available everywhere, and it is even sold in the dark web, in an easy manner. Plus, it's also sold in a legal manner outside. A lot of personal information is available outside in India. So given this kind of a situation, we are absolutely, not at all well prepared to handle increase in the cyber crime and cyber threats. The awareness around what you need to do when you are a person who have faced a cyber crime kind of a situation. What is the next step? How do you deal with the situation? That awareness is also not really very prevalent. So we are still a very long way, in my view, and a lot of effort needs to be put in terms of training and imparting this kind of a knowledge to the wider population. And the corporates definitely need to have that as a, some kind of a social responsibility to educate, which they are doing. But what is being done is still not enough to kind of educate the mass.
I understand. Yeah. But at the same time, I go to Abhijit now. Uh, Abhijit, privacy is a new term for me. Like, in the sense that, we used to have postcards, right? And, it's, coming in our WhatsApp also, right? We were never concerned about our privacy as a country. So why this buzzword now, and why we are talking about privacy?
So Dave, is this a question for me?
Yeah, Abhijit.
Yeah. The privacy is because, you're talking to your girlfriend and you don't want your wife to get advertisements on divorce lawyers. So, to put it simply, the privacy concern has, okay, let me give you a small background. You will then probably will be able to delve it a little detail. The American system works on a trust-based model. But there is one clink in the armor, and that is primarily coming in from something called personally identifiable information, which is called PII in short form. There is an equivalent here in India also, but it is not yet, does not yet have any legal validity. So in the US, you will not be able to store a person's name and the mobile number together. Okay. Now, if you want to do that, you have to redact it. Redact means, there is a mobile number, so you put star, 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 star. Okay. Or if it is an SSN social security number, you put star, 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 and then the last 4 digits is visible. So that is redaction. In India, we do have redaction methods. In when you are receiving a bank account statement, you will see that part of your account is redacted, account number. Privacy is a huge problem right now. In the US, companies can suffer billions of dollars of losses and lawsuits. But how do they do it? They will not, the company, let's say, a bank, say American Express Bank, or say Bank of America, will not do that themselves. They still would like to reach out to the customer. And to reach out to the customer, you definitely need a name and the number. So they will get a third party to do that for them. In India, now I'm coming back to India. In India, these rules are generally respected by the banks. But then what the bank will do, bank will hire a third party call center, and then they will share the entire data. Okay. If you have taken a loan, or if you have taken a credit card, if there is some outstanding, okay, they will give the entire data to another company. And then they will guide, then somebody from that company will call you up and say, look, this is your account number and you have an outstanding, or I have a personal loan for you, This is infringing on privacy. So people don't like it. For example, I would definitely not like some random guy calling me on my mobile phone and saying that, look, you have bought this and I have a personal loan for you. We are calling you from, say, Axis Bank or HDFC Bank. HDFC Bank and Axis Bank are on the forefront of this scam. I don't know if anybody is from HDFC or anybody from Axis Bank. I am just taking a very detached view of it. And they keep on calling because they have a huge number targets to fulfill. And you cannot fulfill those number targets by normal organic development of the relationship that you have with the client. So they will get a third party to do that. The privacy concern comes in without your consent, the bank has shared the data. That is a huge problem. Okay. The second is, you will see the growth of a lot of online education systems that has happened in the last couple of years, with Baiju getting some $500 million of investment, I don't know exactly. And then with that money, they bought over another absolutely nonsense company called White Art Junior. Okay, and they're also buying another company, I think Akash. So basically, they're trying to gain market share or growth by using acquisition as a model. I'm talking about Baiju, it's a Bangalore-based company. The problem with this, you sign up with something with Baiju or something with any other company, Indian I'm talking about, okay? You will see that data, suddenly you will see many companies are coming and trying to emailing you or bombard you with information that, why didn't you do this? This is another course and that is another course, okay? Why? Because in India, every lead that you generate cost, you can bill 15 rupees per lead. It goes between 15 rupees to 200 rupees in India, I'm telling you, okay? So it's the very easiest way to do it. I have a database of say 100,000, 1 lakh, okay? I want to make a first buck. I sell the entire 100,000 to somebody at 15 lakhs because per lead is 15 rupees, okay? Arun is there, so Arun would be knowing, this is how the digital marketing method works, which is the lead and the influencer marketing. So because of these financial incentives, a company or an organization is going ahead and doing this kind of all sorts of unethical things. Though, and now they will not mention it anywhere.
Yeah.
Okay, they will not mention it anywhere. And they will get somebody else to do that for them. And this is where the huge problem comes in, because one is that our legal infrastructure is not there. In the US, you try and pull this kind of stunt, you'll be taken to the court. Okay, and so one of the things that you should not never do, and I think I keep on telling many people, is that please do not have any discussion, any banking or financial transaction discussions over phone. You ask them to send an email to me. They will never be able to do it. You know why? Because they don't have the corporate email ID.
Got it.
Okay, they will always call you on the phone. So say that if somebody calls you about even for a normal banking transaction that you are doing, let's say you have an account with Citibank, and somebody calls you, look, sir, I am calling you from Citibank, and I have this offer for you. They say, please put the offer on the email. And they say, no, I don't have email access. So that means you know it is not a genuine company. Okay, so privacy concern comes in. A is from the nuisance value this telemarketer is creating. That's number one. And number two is that there is no legal there is no legal recourse that you can take, except that you can say that you can complain to the TRAI, and you can put your number on the DND. Even if your number is on DND, still people will call you. Okay.
Yeah, that's true.
My view is, sir, is that because there is absence of legal recourse,
Yeah,
and the laws, particular cyber laws, and the mechanism of doing it. For example, if you have a phone call and somebody is doing it, you cannot go and register a complaint in the local police office. You have to go all the way to the cybercrime department, and those guys will be chewing pan or having cigarette or going out on having food or having lunch and canteen because they're overworked people.
correct.
I will come, Manas. Yeah, blockchain is a very new thing that is happening in cyber security right now. But it is not blockchain; it is BlockDAG, DAG. Okay, because they have used graph theory to improve the blockchain mechanism.
Right.
So, now coming back to
yeah.
Sorry.
So thank you for the insight of the privacy. Like, this is really an eye opener that, how our personal data is getting used, compromised, and then misused. So I come to Mithilesh, like, the other day we were talking about, the new thing that is we are hearing in the news, right? And we are very much concerned. It's about the whole WhatsApp privacy, new privacy policy. So you would like to touch upon, like, what is the issue and what should we do as an individual, or I don't know, like, if that is a real concern for the organizations. But if individuals are compromised, anyway, organizations are also compromised, correct?
So, in fact, today's morning update is that WhatsApp has deferred their policy enforcement, which was planned to be done by 8th of February this year. And what does it mean for us? So we really need to understand, as Abhijit just mentioned about the detail about the privacy. So we also know, and Priya also mentioned some time back that we have our digital footprint everywhere because of whether it's intentionally or unintentionally, it is there over internet, mobile network, everywhere. So when you are as a digital identity, you are a product. You are a product, and for a product, there are certain attributes, right? So whether you do a shopping, whether you do a banking transactions, for every organization, you are a product, and you have a certain attributes, certain characteristics, and that is what you are being sold off, right? So I will just take it back. Why there is so much hue and cry on privacy when WhatsApp has come up with the new. So there's nothing new what WhatsApp has come up. It was already there in their terms and condition, but it was more like a fine print. So the same WhatsApp terms and condition, it doesn't apply to the European Union. So therein, if they have to use any personal identifiable information, which we generally in the BFSI segment, we call it as a PII. So for any personally identifiable information, all developed countries there are having multiple laws and regulatory guidelines. And if the organizations who want to misuse or they have misused those guidelines, they have been put in under huge legal penal courses. Okay. Now, I'll give you a couple of examples. Like US has multiple privacy-related laws which runs across various states. California has again very recently come up with some laws on that. the earlier laws like Dodd-Frank, Wall Street related laws, wherein it protects the customers' privacy from any transactions of financial related stuff. When you talk about UK has their own Data Protection Act. When you go to European Union has their EU GDPR, which is a widely known privacy act in Europe. So any organization who want to deal or do any kind of business in those geography, so they have to be very mindful. So they can't play around with the privacy or customers' data. If they want to have the customers' data for any financial transactions or for financial uses or business uses, they really need to take a consent from the customer. But if I take you back to our India geography, so although the penetration of internet, the penetration of data, uses of the data has gone in a big spike in the last couple of years when the data has become much cheaper. But that way the regulatory body, that way the government are yet to come up with the stringent regulations. Now I'll talk about the Data Privacy Act in India. So which are so there is a IT Act of 2000, but specific to that, the data privacy related stuff. So a particular policies, a bill which are yet to be official become a rule for the country are yet to come into existence. So till the time that kind of policies, that till the time that legal bill is not officially being passed by the parliament, you will not be in a position to go and challenge any of this organization who want to use your personally identifiable information for any kind of business requirement. Now it is like they are offering you their products and services free of cost. So you are on their mercy that how they want to utilize your attributes. And again, I'll come back saying that as you are a product, you have certain attributes. What do you mean by certain attributes? So if I am at the age of 40, so when I do a certain banking transaction or when I buy certain products over online, be it at any e-commerce portal, so they always identify my pattern or habit of purchase. They have all my details, right, from my mobile number, email address, various other information, what is the nature of medicines, what I purchase from any online pharma company, or everything, whatever is required at my home, from the groceries or any other aspect. So all data information they have. So how intelligently they want to utilize those information for their own benefit, for their own business, that is entirely on their mercy. So that is how it's not the case in other geography. So unless we come up with those kind of privacy stringent law as soon as possible, this will keep on growing. Not just because today there is so much hue and cry in the social media that WhatsApp has come up with this new policy. They have to come up in a national newspaper at the front page saying that we do respect your privacy and all those things. But if you really read their terms and condition, it is a 12-page terms and condition. Nobody has the time. Whenever you create a WhatsApp account, you just get into inside, because you are just eager to see that how many of my friends, colleagues, family members, they are on WhatsApp. We start exchanging the information, data and all those. But if you read those 12-page guidelines or terms and conditions, you are literally giving all your consent to them that they can play around with anything, whatever you have on your mobile. It is not only on WhatsApp, whatever you have on your mobile, right from your contact list, your buying pattern, your financial transaction, because as you know that this organization is also now in the payment space. So they want all those information from you, and they treat you as a product. Mind it, they treat you as a product, and till the time this will continue, this is the way how we will be utilized as a product, as an attribute, and privacy will be entirely on their mercy, right? So that's my take on that.
Got it. Yeah. So it's really scaring, actually. Maybe we have never thought about it so deeply, right? And maybe because it's about WhatsApp and it's so widely used, So we are concerned, and it's coming in out in the newspaper. But maybe we are already using certain applications which we don't know. We are already compromising our privacy. Good. Priya, I come to you, like see, one of the change that from an organization standpoint, we see is the more and more cloud adoption. Correct. So more and more organizations are actually moving their data to the cloud. So what do you think? Like see, it is obvious, nobody can deny the the flexibility, the advantages of cloud. But at the same time, the security challenge will also change, right? Because once it is moving out of your on-premise environment to somewhere else where you don't control anything. So what is your take on that? Like what how the cybersecurity strategy should change when the cloud adoptions are growing in India specifically for the organizations?
Interesting question, Dave. And yeah, so first thing I just wanted to clear is, when organizations are moving to cloud, it doesn't mean that there is a compromise on security, or there is no control on the security. Of course, there is a considerable amount of control on security. Let me just draw a very layman parallel to this cloud versus on-prem, right? Let's say you have an independent house, and today we have large high-rise apartments as well. So when you are in an independent house, you have to protect your house and your property from burglars or any attacks that's happening. So what you do, you put all the grill around, and then you ensure you probably have a pet dog to protect you, or you find all possible. You might put cameras all around your house so that you're able to monitor who's coming and who's going in. So there is a lot of investment which you have to do. Maybe you have to hire a security guard also. So there is considerable amount of information security investment which companies need to put in an on-prem data center. And these have to be managed, administered, and ensured it is of the best in class model and quality. So vis-a-vis, let me see the parallel to a large apartment complex. So here what happens, it is not that it is not there is no security. In fact, it's more secure, because when you have a large apartment, there is a scale, so you could invest on and outsource the security to the best security firm, and manage the security there. There is all round cameras which are put and managed by the apartment complexes. So when I draw that parallel, this is exactly what I talk about in a cloud kind of a model, where they are able to manage the scale and provide much better security than probably what you could offer on-prem kind of a model. Of course, if you're ready to invest more, and if you're ready to put in more money onto the security parts, nothing like that, you have it within your house, so you're absolutely sure when you're looking at everything, you find all my stuff is secure. But we also go and open bank lockers and put our golden bank lockers today. So why do we do that? Because we feel that the banks are more secure than having it in your own house. So it's a similar kind of a model when you look at cloud. It's easy adoption. It's much lesser in terms of administrative hassles. It is also enabling you, especially during the pandemic phase, in whatever we are doing today, the ability to move into a complete digital and a zero trust kind of an environment. So when you are designing your cloud migration, or when you're designing your strategy to move to cloud, you always move with a kind of thought around zero trust. So anywhere, from anywhere, anybody is able to connect to your portals, internal systems, and be able to work seamlessly. That is the kind of a model that we're looking at. So it is absolutely a good move, in my view, to move to cloud and ensure, moving to cloud, of course, with a lot of thought on how you want to strategize this move. What are the various security controls that you can apply, buy, and put in your own infrastructure which is there on cloud. So it's a much better
Absolutely.
option for us. feel.
Absolutely. So in that way, like, the topic of today, right? So work from anywhere, that also, gets supported by this cloud adoption. Like, if we only depend on the on-prem, it will be very, very big challenge to enable people working from home or anywhere, right? Just because, we have infrastructure in cloud, we are using certain software which are hosted out of cloud. It becomes, we could survive this pandemic. Otherwise, everything would have been in halt, right? Very well said. But at the same time, I understand that, Abhijit, Mithilesh, and you are also talking about, the awareness, lack of awareness, and we are not really prepared, with the cyber threat scenarios that are changing. But when you talk about, strategy, security strategy, more cloud adoption, newer security, implementations or, protections. At the same time, I feel like, do we really have that kind of resources available in Indian market who can actually work on these, security initiatives, projects? Are you really, getting those people in the market? Priya, is there a lack?
Yes, I would say, because there is an increased demand in cybersecurity professionals, and this topic is only seen a good amount of traction and importance maybe in the last 5 years or so. Prior to that, probably it was more kind of okay, it's an IT world. So the IT, the CIO or the IT head takes care of information security and cyber security as well. But if you see today, the evolution is moved from that world to a boardroom kind of a position where there is a chief information security officers for company who is part of the board, and there is a lot of investment that is going on in terms of improving the cybersecurity landscape of the organization. So because of this increase in demand for cybersecurity professionals, and probably this was not thought through much earlier, to be able to scale and have as many professionals as we want in this space. So what we see today as a trend, when I go and recruit people for the cybersecurity or information security space, you see a lot of people move naturally from from an infrastructure professional to a cybersecurity professional, because they already have the necessary background to things, and eventually move into a cybersecurity professional world by doing a lot of training and educating them on the various trends and what the industry demands. So it's one of the areas which is growing, and there is definitely a lot of lacuna in the cybersecurity professional space today, and eventually it will start growing because we didn't have a very strong pipeline to start with. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I understand. Abhijit, my query to you will be that, with this, demand, in terms of either awareness to the common population or proper training, cybersecurity training for the professionals, right? So what type of, training, or, what type of, awareness program you foresee will be helpful for Indian context? Abhijit?
It's a quite a complex question. I don't see, but I see that Indian professionals are pretty good. There is no questions about it. But if you look at the disparity, the compensation disparity in India, particularly for students who are going out in the job market, you will see at the lower end, there are students who get, say, BTech or BE. One student is getting 2 lakhs and another student is getting 60 lakhs, even 70 lakhs, even 80 lakhs as well. one of the inertia that I have seen and I have personally experienced is companies think that cybersecurity as an area is an area which is a work similar to security guard. Okay. And you don't want to spend too much money on the security guard. It's simple, right? Psychologically, I'm saying. And this is where the first vulnerability of the organization comes. This is the first problem. So they will, so typically what they do is they will hire the wares from the established market players, and then they will ask the people to do the certifications on those. If you have such a certification, I'm not naming the brands here. So you come be my guest, and at a salary of say 3 lakhs, 4 lakhs. Okay. Now there is nothing wrong in this model. The only problem is that when it comes to innovation, when it comes to thinking beyond, that is where these students or these people or these professionals lack, or I would say probably lack the competence. Okay. And you need a security guard not to just stay there and watch who is coming and who is going. So it is much beyond identity and access management. You need the security guard to respond to a situation where something untoward has happened. Are you getting what I'm saying? So the mentally we are prepared. I will have somebody in my apartment as a security guard who is going to do the identity and access management care. That's if you look at the interspectrum of the Indian IT landscape or the infrastructure landscape, is primarily focused on identity and access management, intrusion detection systems, and intrusion prevention systems, period, and some firewalls, right? These are just the security guards. You have a dog, that's all.
Yeah.
But what happens? You have somebody who is overpowering this whole model. So let's say you have a dacoit coming in. Now, what is the security guard doing? And I'm telling you, he will not be able to do anything. Probably he doesn't even have a phone call, a phone number with him. Okay. Same happens with the organizations. In the organization, we are just hiring security guards. We are not hiring engineers. Now, when we're talking about engineers, you will see most of the thing, and I have seen a couple of syllabuses in this area. So they will do ethical hacking and they will do, training on different licenses, I'm yet to see one course in India. The cybersecurity, the foundation of cybersecurity goes on 2 or 3 areas. One is number theory. Okay. The second is your, what is it called? Convex optimization models. Okay. Third is combinatorial. Okay. You will not be able to find one course which has these 3 courses. Why? Because they are difficult courses. It's mathematics driven. Okay. Unless and until you know, so when you get into the root cause analysis problem for such an attack which has happened, you don't have the technical expertise to deal with it. So what you do is that you hire an expert. So essentially the CTO will take cover behind an expert. They said, okay, there is a problem, so I've hired an expert, I'm done with it. This is more got to do with cultural orientations, in my view. I have been a CTO of a company earlier, and I have faced difficulties when I was thinking about hiring somebody at 10 lakhs, for example, whereas the budget is only allowing me to provide 3 lakhs. At 3 lakhs, you don't get the quality of a person who is giving, say, who is coming at a cost of, say, 10 lakhs. Why is Google Google? It is not because they are a smart company, no. Because they have hired the smartest guys in the world. Why is Amazon such a biggest retailer? Why are they successful? It's not because the idea was great. And let me tell you that there are many other greater ideas as well. They're not Nobel laureate, there are Nobel laureate level ideas. But the point what I'm saying is that they have got an amazing set of people.
Yeah.
So unless and until we are able to understand the seriousness behind the subject and then dovetail our culture in terms of starting from the hiring and starting from the training also, you will be continuously be chasing a moving target. Okay. There are people on the darknet, and I know many of these guys in Bangalore, Bombay, Hyderabad, they are working in this area. No, it is not that I'm part of darknet, I'm not. I'm just a law-abiding, tax-paying citizen. But these people are there.
Correct.
These people are there. So in effect, what I think is the rudimentary training part that should go inside of a course is you have to be damn good in operating system. Absolutely, this is a must. Okay. The second is that you need to know how this whole foundation works. So the foundation is based on number theory of anything that you got to do with cyber attacks. It's basically you're playing around with numbers, you know.
Right.
Okay, and then using those to generate those combinatorial analytics, which is combinatorics, and some optimization techniques, because essentially you're, you know, whether you are using any of the gears of brand A, B, and C, it is all probabilistic. So they are generating a number. Okay, so this is likely. So you can set your, you know, firewall, for example, at a highest level, which is, so anybody who is coding less than 8, you will not let enter. Okay, and you can also reduce it to anybody setting in, coming in, say at a 3, which is particularly the DMZ and the military zone kind of setup. You know, you can differentiate. It's far more deeper than that. Far more deeper than that. So I think in terms of organization has to understand that you are not hiring a security guard anymore. This is a military. There is a difference between military and a security guard. Okay.
Absolutely.
So you hire a security guard and then no, I have been hacked. You have been hacked because of your own stupidity.
Exactly.
It's as simple as that.
Yeah. So I think, you know, the seriousness for the organizations, you know, in selecting, you know, the security resources, right? Cyber security resources is most important. So with the same context, Mithilesh, like, you know, what do you think, like, you know, what are the ways we can actually increase the awareness? Means professional training and creating the cybersecurity resource pool is one thing which Abhijit covered very well. So from a awareness standpoint, what do you think we should do? That is number one. And I will come to Priya, like, you know, these are my concluding questions to you people. So what are the common, you know, hygienes, like, you know, cyber hygienes we should, you know, follow as individuals? So Mithilesh, to you, from a awareness standpoint, what should we do?
So when we are talking about the cloud security and awareness around that, so one thing what is we should be very mindful that just moving your infra or application or product or solution on the cloud is not going to keep you away from your responsibility of the security aspect of your data or the services what you are offering to the customer. So what does it mean? So there are two aspects to it. So there is one concept called shared security responsibilities. So whenever you are moving your any business to the cloud, so there are two kind of security. One is the cloud insecurity, and another is the cloud of security. So anything below the infrastructure part, which is being offered by the cloud service provider, that is something the security is being owned by the CSP, the cloud service provider. Anything which are getting built over the operating system, so the application or the processing or the compute or the data storage, which are essentially your area, the organization area. So that is of your area. So that is you are responsible for that. So now coming back to your question, that how this kind of awareness can be built on the security aspects around the cloud. So various programs are also being run by the government of India in various capacity with various institutions. There are a lot of good institutions who offer various kind of cloud security related, cyber security related training programs as well. So these are one of the way to get the real good kind of training and certain hands-on experience also, especially for the people who are in the students category from schools or colleges, those kind of setup, right? But eventually, as Abhijit also mentioned, that when you as an organization, you want the military kind of people from that kind of background or that kind of knowledge and experience to defend your cyber boundary, to defend your digital boundary of the organization, you need to have the real such kind of people. You can't have people, just people with a security professional kind of background, or that kind of pay structure or the payment. What he has brought a very valid point. But I think gradually that interest or the attention has also increased over a period of time, because Priya has also added one very good point that CISO at many of the organizations, they have started getting a board position. And I personally, after spending 2 decades in the security arena, I have seen the kind of change in the thought process at a board level. Now, as many of the organizations across the globe, you will see many of the regulators, they are making the board accountable for any cyber security breach happening in their organization. That is the reason why CISO or CIO or CTO is getting that kind of attention in the board across the table. So that's the one aspect. But coming back to your question on the awareness part, I think there are various ways where you can acquire your training and awareness. There are largely 3 to 4 cloud service providers, not only in India, but outside India also, like the leading player is the Amazon with the AWS offerings, and they are leading in this business by almost around 70% of the market shares in the cloud businesses of Amazon, followed by Google, Microsoft, and then other players like Rackspace, IBM. They also have certain percentage in this business. And all these service providers, they have some kind of training, certifications, some kind of available paid training or some kind of non-paid training. So these are the ways where you can definitely get certain knowledge and training acquired for their product. And as I said, that there is security in cloud and there is security off cloud. And cloud is something which is inevitable. And this pandemic has given everybody this lesson, those who were prepared, those who were not prepared, to come on the cloud as soon as possible. So when everything is moving on cloud, so therefore you need people who understands cloud, who understands the basics of clouds, who understands how the insecurity of security of the cloud to be managed. Whether you are an end customer, then you should be knowing that when you are moving your business to the cloud, when you are moving your data to the cloud, how to protect that data, how to protect the identity and access management when something is getting placed on the cloud. But when you are a cloud service provider, so you also need to understand how the infrastructure and other things need to be protected. So there's a lot of opportunities and big avenues are there. And when we are in the new decade, I must say that cloud is going to rule this decade. Till last couple of years back, people were hesitant whether should we move on cloud, not to move on cloud. Some of them who took this initiative to transition from on-prem to the cloud, they really benefited during the pandemic year. They didn't have to rethink about their digital strategy. They were ready, they were up and running. They had to just scale up. But people who were not at all at cloud, they had to start building up. So for them, it was a painful exercise. And I know a lot of my industry ex-colleague and industry people who had a different level of challenges. So it was not an easy task. So it's always good to put effort and budget and investment on training, because you never know that nobody had predicted that this kind of pandemic will come and this will create such a havoc across the globe. So you never know what is the next in 2021 or in 2022. So it's always good to have good training, awareness, and readiness to tackle that kind of situation.
Thank you, Mithilesh. So Priya, coming back to you, I might club couple of questions for you actually. So since you have very good knowledge on the banking and financial system, so one question is related to open banking, right? So where we are exposing the APIs, API services. So is it increasing the risk? That is the question that I actually got from the participants here. And then if you can touch upon the individual cyber hygiene. So these are the two questions for you. One I'm picking up from the audience and another is from my side.
Individual cyber?
cyber hygiene, like, what should we do, like, in our day-to-day life, like, what should we practice? One thing I understand from very clearly from Abhijit's point of view is that control your greed. That is definitely one of them.
Yeah. So I will just take the first question first on the open APIs for banking. The first thing when we talk about cyber security is nothing is protected, irrespective of how many layers of security controls that you put in. However you keep it secured, there is always a probability that there could be a chance of an attack, and that is why that's the biggest problem of today. And hence there are a lot of analytics around how do we prevent and how do we detect and how do we protect. So when we look at cybersecurity, how do you prevent and how do you actually detect if something is happening, and if you've detected it, then how do you prevent it in the future? So these are the three aspects. So whether the banking environment is kept in a very closed manner, and you don't have exposed open APIs or open banking as a whole, is a big concept today. And more banks are moving towards open banking kind of a concept. Like I said, so when you decide that you want to move into this kind of a model, what is absolutely important is to have a very strong strategy around it, because there is no point going open banking if you don't have a strategy around protection, around prevention, and around detection of any malicious activity. So this is absolutely critical. And like I mentioned in my previous question also, zero trust architecture is what we need to keep as a foundation for any designing of any critical applications today, because that's how the world is moving towards. And if you don't adapt it, then at some point in time we'll be forced to adapt it. Like for example, even the cloud migration, what Mithilesh mentioned, organizations who adopted it earlier were able to overcome during this pandemic situation, and organization who had not adopted it had to go through anyways that churn and finally have to have a strategy towards cloud. So someday this is going to be a very basic service offering, and hence it becomes important to plan and design it appropriately. So today when we look at the architecture also, it is not simple, right? I mean, we'll have to start looking at the cybersecurity professional is just not looking at cyber threats or cyber crimes, or looking at the firewalls, looking at what traffic is coming in and finding out how to protect it and so on. It is a lot more than that. He's also a risk manager. He also needs to be good at data analytics, because you need to analyze your trends, you need to analyze industry trends, you need to see your risk profiling of various applications and look at hence what are the possible threats over there with the data supporting it, and then finally design a strategy and a plan around it. So whenever any organization, irrespective of whether it is open banking or any other different design or a different system that you want to implement, the first thing is to have the strategy and plan clear and involve the cyber security professional at the early stages of the architecture building itself. Because you build a secure architecture, then you can build on it. The foundation has to be pretty strong. So that is my take on the open banking part of it. On your second question on cyber security hygiene, right? So like I said, uh, you know, uh, protection, prevention, detection. So how do we protect 96%, and these are studies conducted by Cybint and all of them. 96% of the attacks or cyber security crimes happen because there is no awareness, and it happens due to an end user's machine getting compromised. There are very few instances where you've had a breach into the servers. It's not that it has not happened. There has been situations like that, but 96% of the time you always have majority of the issues because an endpoint is compromised. And hence what remains as hygiene today is for us to also look at endpoint protection, in terms of what kind of controls we could have on the endpoint, which we're doing on the servers in terms of protecting those endpoints well. And very basic thing is the vulnerability management. This is a topic usually ignored, and people take own time to patch the servers or patch the endpoints. Sometimes the end users don't do the restart of the machine, so even if the latest patches are pushed by the technology teams, it doesn't get applied because they've not restarted. So there is a lot of awareness that needs to be built to ensure forced reboot or anything, and ensure the systems are all patched well. At least you are protecting the systems from known attacks. So the 0-day attacks are something that we all are something concerned about. But today there are very intelligent softwares which are there, which will also help us give great deal of protection on 0-day attacks. Plus, along with AI, there are systems which will monitor the activity of the user, and if there is any different activity noticed from that particular user, the alerts go on to the teams to look at it and understand whether these are right or not. So that way we are able to prevent any future problems from happening. So constant monitoring, ensuring having a good vulnerability patch management strategy, ensure a strong risk management. This is very, very basic. There is, there should be no compromise on these aspects, followed by a regular and strong risk management is also equally important. So I feel these are the whole important things, and one of the other most important thing is also the ecosystem. You could be protecting your environment, you could be protecting the people who are accessing your environment, but there are also players. So today, if you look at a bank, there is a transaction you do. So there's a POS machine, then there's an acquiring partner, and then there is a bank, and then there's an SMS which goes to the user. So there is an SMS service provider involved. So to operate a service,
Multiple
it's a
third
whole
parties.
ecosystem. Yes. So you also need to have a strategy to ensure you are aware of what are the cyber security protection norms, and audit these third parties also on a regular basis to ensure your data is protected and your consumers' interests are protected. So these are, my learnings from the experience.
Thanks, Priya. So I think, we have almost consumed our stipulated time. So we'll take another 2-3 minutes and conclude the session. So I go back to Mithilesh, and then I'll conclude with Abhijit, and then I'll hand over to Arun. So Mithilesh, we have one question from Jayabrata Mukherjee, and it is most relevant, in terms of, the software professionals who are actually, designing different applications. So the question is that, how do we, train, aware, and monitor, that is needed for software professionals who are coding, right? Developing the software applications. So what is your take on that?
So I have two aspects to this. One is that many of the software professionals, they have been using software development life cycle, right? But that has always been a traditional approach of development. And for security of any software getting developed using the SDLC.
No, ma'am. I'll give you a call back in 15 minutes, okay?
So what it used to happen that at various stages of software development, we used to build in the security. So I'll give you an example. So while you start during the requirement analysis phase, that time itself you get into the real game of security, that whether is there any specific regulatory or any specific legislative requirement is there to protect the data of this particular software what you are going to develop. So right from the security requirement analysis phase till end of the testing of the software, whether you are getting into the UAT and SIT stage where you are performing the UAT testing or SIT testing, you further do a security testing. So each and every stage, I'm not getting into all the stages. right from the design, development, and the implementation aspect. But what I am trying to say that this has been a traditional approach. Now, when we are coming into a agile kind of setup, when we are talking about the cloud, or when we are talking about when your time to market of any application has reduced drastically, where you don't have the time to spend 2 years or 3 years building a module and software. So there comes your DevOps. So when the DevOps comes into picture, you have the agility where you have the Scrum related things which need to be followed, right? So when DevOps kind of setup is there, when you are developing or building your application on the DevOps, then you have to think about security of the DevOps. So there's a huge paradigm shift with respect to the earlier approach of development of software and their security aspect. Now at every stage, every way when you are building in, security had to be thoughtful and should be implemented in that process. So as when we are moving towards the cloud, when cloud adoption has increased so far, when we are moving towards the DevOps, so that securing the DevOps environment is very, very important. And for not only the working professional, but also for the people who are from the academia and from college, university, and school, they should learn, because that is the next wave where this is going to be a de facto, that it is not you where you will be asked whether do you know the security aspects of DevOps, but it is by default, it will be expected that whenever you are a programmer or a developer, you should be knowing how to secure the DevOps environment, right? And how to manage those kind of environment from the security aspect. So that's
Sure,
what are
sure.
2 cents from my side.
Thank you, Mithilesh. So we'll conclude with Abhijit. Abhijit, we have one question from Mr. Sudarshan. If you can answer that, he says that I'm IT operations cyber service delivery manager. What is the good certification on information security or cyber security that you can recommend? There are many other questions like, quantum computing, quantum cryptography. So those are, some of the, topic which we will definitely, try to address in our, next sessions, right? But for the benefit of time, Abhijit, if you can answer this one.
I can tell you what's happening in the US and what's happening in the top end market in India. See, earlier, the model was that you have a computer, let's say it's a server, and you are coding on top, and you're writing your Java or your .NET or your PHP environment and running and putting an open service HTTP server for somebody else to access your systems. Okay. That changed suddenly to, and particularly for people who are here, it may be interesting to you. I'm just sharing a pure American experience, the way it works in the US right now. It's working in the US. So that changed when the server moved from on-premise to cloud. Okay. So what changed was, now you are not controlling the cloud infrastructure. Okay. You have a space out there, and many other services are built around the space. So for example, if you go with AWS cloud or IBM cloud or Azure cloud, anything that you can do. So the model was, now you are only doing the software development, but then you are also looking at this. I'm talking about early mid say 2010 approximately. So you are writing your application start from the zero. You're still, but only thing is that you have a server out there. You don't have to worry about your server in the on-premise and the limitations that the server may be having. Now, what happened was, during the early 2012, 2014, around that time, a concept called microservices-based engineering came in place. Okay. So what the microservices engineering was doing, and now you don't have to write a shopping cart. There is a microservices available on Amazon. Let's say I'm giving an example of Amazon. You use that. Correct. So like that, registration, for example, the user registration is also available as a microservices. Okay. And within that, you can also have open authentication systems which Google, Facebook, and other companies also provide. It is also microservice, by the way. Okay. So the microservices based architecture started coming in from the 2012, and it is gaining huge traction right now. Okay, so as a software developer, you don't have to worry about many things because you can actually hire or rent a microservices to deal with that problem, because it is not possible for you to know everything. It is not possible. Now, the recent strategy, which is happening since 2016, 2017 onwards, is serverless compute. Serverless compute means you are dynamically, the system, the cloud computing, the cloud or the Amazon cloud or any other cloud that is there, it is dynamically provisioning your systems based on the user load and based on the application load. So that is a serverless compute. So this is an abstraction layer above. So there is a bare metal, and then you have cloud services, and there is an abstraction layer on top of this, which is the serverless compute. The moment you get into, and this is going to happen. So if you're software developers out here, you may be looking forward, and Amazon has a product called Amazon AWS Lambda in this space. So in the serverless compute, unless and until you are using microservices, because any code that you write, you cannot just put in it 0 to infinity. It's not possible. It will not work. It will crash your systems, right? Whenever you're provisioning in terms of your, scalability. When you're writing an application. I was a software developer earlier and just sharing that experience. So instead of doing that, you go with big ticket serverless compute, and use microservices if you want to solve this problem. Now coming back to the problem, and it is better, the quicker you adapt to it,
Yeah,
the better
so
it is for you.
actually, Sudarshan mentioned that he is from IT operations, from his IT operations service delivery. So his question was that, what kind of, certification, if you can suggest.
Certificates, in terms of certifications, certifications are typically vendor-based certification. Typically vendor-based certification, right. And right. I don't want to utilize or hijack skill taps, webinar and telling you do brand A, brand B, brand C. Typically, my suggestion would be that whatever devices, whatever gear your company is using, use the certification track of that particular brand. That would be my suggestion instead of reinventing something else. Okay, this is one. And second is that if you want to do something very innovative in terms of not the security work, okay, I'm talking about the military work, okay, then you're talking about having a master's and those kind of work. Correct. Because certifications are only meant for a technician.
Correct.
It is not meant for the engineers. Okay, for the engineers, you have to get into the advanced studies and at a master's level, probably, or similar kind of a thing. So.
Thanks, Abhijit. I think a lot of takeaways from these sessions. So one of the key takeaways is awareness, right? And then maintaining certain cyber hygiene, either as an individual and as a organization. I like that one. I'm still repeating it. Control your grid. And that's the most important thing. And human.
I just want to, before you mute me out, I just want to also tell you an interesting thing that probably the professionals out here might need to look at is that a large part of the cyber attacks happen in connivance with somebody inside of the company.
Correct.
Okay. So there is always a man in the middle.
Yeah.
Okay. And these people are basically disgruntled people. One of the reasons, people who have been, whose egos have been brushed or something has happened. So this is also protecting your systems from your internal enemy as well. So it's a very, very important. There is no way you can actually hack into a banking system without somebody in the bank is collaborating with you to do it. It is not so easy. So the protecting yourself not only from outsiders, but protecting your systems also from insiders. This is a dimension. This is real life. I'm not getting into the real life examples, but this is what in my experience has happened.
Absolutely. So I would, at the end, I would like to thank my panelists, Priya, Mithilesh, and Abhijit, for this, excellent, sessions, your knowledge and experience that you have shared with us. I have overshot 10 minutes, I think, the overall time. So, giving back baton to Arun, if you would like to have a concluding statement for this session, then we can. And whoever sent the questions, rest assured that we have captured that and we'll get back to you through emails. Arun?
Yeah, thank you, Devkumar. Thank you, panelists, Priya, Abhijit, and Mithilesh. It was quite riveting, actually. I didn't even realize that it was 1.5 hours past, and we were kind of extending that. So it's fantastic. The range of discussion was very rich. Now, here is a set, kind of a wide-ranging conversation that we had. We have got some very interesting questions. I'm sure we will be sending out, some sort of written answers to them as well. And the idea would be to build up this conversation in a sequential manner, in a very focused way, all around the issue of the various dimensions of cybersecurity, right? So I really thank you all for being there, for participating with so much of energy and so much of focus, and see you the next time. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone.
I'm signing off.